Joining me now, host of MSNBC's The Rachel Maddow Show and author of the new book, Drift, The Unmooring of American Military Power, Rachel Maddow. Welcome.
Thanks,
it's good
David.
to have you here.
It's great to be here. Thanks.
I am so interested in this book, and I read it, and as I sum it up, it is about the idea that somehow America got comfortable with the idea of being in a perpetual state of war. And have we really debated that? And can you dismantle what you call this military superstructure? I have to ask you, of all the topics I thought that Rachel Maddow would take on, this was not the one that I put on top of my list for your first book.
Yeah. You know, when I got the contract to write this book, I had a radio show, and I since have a TV show, and I get to talk about whatever I want. And I wanted to write a book because I felt like I couldn't talk about this in the other things that I did for a living. I feel like this is a longer idea. This is not a soundbite thing. This is not a between the commercials idea. I felt like I needed to lay it out long form, but it's been bothering me for a very long time. This idea that we've made a series of changes over time, over the course of my lifetime, I think, that in all cases have made it easier, made it a little frictionless, given us less friction toward using war, less political friction, less public discomfort with it, in a way that we have gone to war so frequently and felt it so much less. It bothers me emotionally, and so I wanted to treat it in a long-form way so I could really lay out the case.
There's a lot to this, and as I was reading it, I got out the black pen and underlined this particular section of the book that I'll put on the screen. While America has been fighting two of its longest ever boots-on-the-ground wars in the decade following 9/11, fighting them simultaneously, less than 1% of the adult U.S. population has been called upon to strap on those boots. Not since the peacetime years between World War I and II, according to a Pew Research study, has a smaller share of Americans served in the armed forces. You write, half of the American public says it has not been even marginally affected by 10 years of constant war. We've never in our long history been further from the ideal of the citizen soldier, from the idea that America would find it impossible to go to war without disrupting domestic civilian life. That carries a high cost.
Yeah, that has a moral cost to us as a country. And you can talk about the strategic cost too. I think there is an argument to be had. It's not necessarily the argument of this book that if the public doesn't feel it, we use war more. I think that's sort of the implicit case that we found ourselves in. But ultimately, I mean, what we decided to do as a public, as a country, through our democratic process, was give ourselves a giant multi-trillion-dollar tax cut just before 9/11 and then the Afghanistan war. That was not rescinded once we started the Afghanistan war. And then right after, we started a second simultaneous giant land war in Iraq. We gave ourselves another round of tax cuts. That is a symptom of something wrong. That is a symptom of a country that doesn't feel it, that we're at war. We feel like the military goes to war. The country doesn't go to war. When the Iraq War ended, after 8.5 years, more than 4,000 American lives lost. I mean, St. Louis threw a parade. New York decided not to. The civilian population didn't much notice. I feel like the overall feeling among the civilian population was, oh, was that still going on? We ought to be a country that goes to war when we go to war, if only so we do not become so separated from our military that they're not effectively fighting in our name anymore. They're fighting on their own.
We've talked about this off the air. What strikes me about this, even as a progressive and somebody who knows your program, obviously knows your views, your analysis here and your criticism is distinctly bipartisan.
Yeah. This is not a problem that emerged because one party did something wrong and one party had the right idea but they lost. This is something that emerged over multiple administrations with people not acting in a conspiratorial way. I mean, there isn't a lot of George W. Bush in this book. There isn't a lot of Barack Obama in this book. I think a lot of these changes that we went through happened post-Vietnam and leading up to 9/11, and the Clinton administration bears some responsibility. Certainly the Reagan administration bears a lot of responsibility, the George H.W. Bush administration as well. We went through these changes over time. Rational political actors, presidents, trying to get around these political problems that they had, made rational decisions about how to get around them. And so we didn't want to upset the public. Okay, we figured out ways to go to war in ways that don't upset the public. We had a political constraint from the Congress. We figured out ways to go to war around the Congress. All of the things that we've done have been decisions that moved us in the same direction, to make war easier, to make it less upsetting.
There are threats that still face the United States from terrorists and others in the age of 9/11 that we still live through. You concede that point in the book, but you make the point as well, to use your words, the military superstructure is going to be really hard to take apart.
Yeah.
That's what you think is critical.
We need a great military. And we occasionally need to fight wars. I don't think we need 1,800 deployed nuclear weapons right now. with thousands more ready to be deployed and thousands more in reserve beyond that. Because the military has become sort of isolated from our political processes, because we find it awkward to fight about them, so we've made it easier for it to sort of go on its own, we have ended up with a military superstructure that isn't something that anybody argued for. Then nothing goes away. One senior defense official told me the only fights we have with Congress are over problems or over programs that the Pentagon doesn't want, that the Congress wants us to keep. Right now there's a fight between the Pentagon and Congress over tanks that Congress wants the Pentagon to have, that the Pentagon does not want. What other part of our government works that way?
I want to mention something that, in addition to this book, and one of the you talk a lot about our returning troops and the issues that they're going to face because of long deployments. One of the things NBC News is doing, and we're starting it this week, is in conjunction with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, is hiring our heroes. We're launching it today. It'll be on the Today program across all of our platforms in a big job fair on Wednesday. The notion that these returning soldiers, these men and women, should be hired. America should have the emotional investment to say they have had this incredible experience and sacrificed so much. Now, what do we do for them when they come home?
And it is a little focusing on veterans this way in some ways and calling them our heroes is a thank you. But I also think, I mean, of my generation of veterans, of our generation of veterans, I know of nobody else in my age cohort who is more impressive. I know of nobody else who has worked harder, done more complicated things, and accomplished more in my age group than the people I know who have been to these wars. And so they are a really impressive group of people. They are absolutely leaders for our civilian life going forward.
And what they learn, I often talk about my wife, who was ROTC at Princeton and a captain in the Army and the daughter of a nuclear submarine captain, and she says that she learned as a professional to be decisive because of her military training. That decisiveness and some of those skills that are battle tested literally are of tremendous value back in civilian life and in the private sector here.
That's right. But we've had nearly 2 million Americans who have deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan since 9/11, and their lives and their families' lives have been so different than civilian American families' lives. And bridging that divide, which is a cultural divide and an experiential divide, is something that I think we have a moral responsibility to pursue as a country.
The book is Drift. Rachel, thank you very much.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate it.
And before we go, a quick programming note. You can watch our Press Pass conversation on our blog this week. I sat down with former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. That's at presspass.msnbc.com. That is all for today. We'll be back next week. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.